My family repeatedly told me I was too easily affected by things. They stopped saying that the minute the sheriff showed up at their front porch carrying official documents bearing my name. There wasn't any yelling or prior notice, just the sound of their lives fracturing as they looked at me, stunned, as if I had fundamentally changed the rules overnight. I didn't argue or try to console them. I simply stepped aside, letting the consequence unfold. This happened because 7 days earlier, at the Boise airport, I finally grasped their true opinion of me. 1 plane ticket cancellation, 2 text messages. The instant I read them, the dynamics of our whole family shifted permanently. Before continuing, please hit the like button and mention your current listening location. If your relatives have ever taken things too far, share your experiences below. Let's remind each other that we are not isolated in these situations. If you had met me some years ago, you might have imagined I came from a cheerful, busy family, the type that packs into restaurant booths on Sunday mornings. Acquaintances often noted my kind expression, assuming I had a childhood full of warmth. I never corrected their mistake. It was easier than explaining the hard reality. My parents prioritized dominance significantly more than they ever loved me. While I was growing up, my mother treated my older sister, Sloane, like a coveted, limited edition item. Sloane received all the new clothes, the specially decorated room, and countless framed pictures throughout the house. My experience involved receiving lectures on being thankful, wearing hand-me-downs from neighbors, and sitting on the floor during holidays, as the chairs were reserved for guests. My father wasn't the one who initiated the emotional damage, yet he always stayed near enough to benefit from it. He would frequently smirk, dismiss things with a shrug, or claim he hadn't overheard the remarks that hurt the most. That was his signature way of endorsing their side. By the time I left home for college, I had been forced out of that house twice already. Once was for responding disrespectfully, and the second time occurred because Sloane decided she didn't want to share the bathroom. Dealing with winters near Boise felt drastically different when you were 17, standing outside with just a garbage bag holding your possessions. However, surviving that taught me a crucial lesson. If I wanted security, I needed to construct it for myself. So I achieved it quietly. I held jobs throughout my education, took every undesirable internship available, and focused on financial planning studies late at night in a campus library that smelled distinctly of old rug and burned microwave popcorn. Years later, when I finally moved into my small apartment complex with a lake view, it wasn't lavish, but it absolutely belonged to me. The concierge knew me by name. My son, Miles, who is 6 years old and quite reserved, finally had his own bedroom where nobody instructed him to stay out of the way. He is the single person in my existence who never made me feel like my presence was too large. My parents never grasped that my maintaining distance was an act of self-preservation, not rebellion. Even after establishing myself as a financial consultant, purchasing the condo, and building a life from nothing, they persisted in treating me like the spare child. Sloane remained the celebrated figure, the perfect daughter with an ideal spouse, perfectly curated social media, and the relative everyone bent over backward to satisfy. Therefore, when I saved up for a brief journey, a small, deserved break, I kept the news private. I didn't inform my mother, my father, or even Sloane. I simply craved a few peaceful days where no one could contact me, make demands, or belittle my efforts. But in my family, secrets are short-lived. The very instant my mother discovered I was planning to leave town, the entire situation began to fall apart. The morning I was scheduled to leave felt surprisingly tranquil, the kind of quiet that makes you hope the universe is finally granting you a reprieve. I departed my condo early, kissed Miles goodbye, and promised him I'd bring back a little item from the airport shop. He watched me go, waving from the doorway, his hair still messy from sleep. For the first time in weeks, I permitted myself to genuinely relax. Boise Airport was a typical scene. A patchwork of rolling luggage, rising coffee vapor, and half-awake travelers. I fit right in with my jeans, long coat, and hair tied back. Nothing about my appearance signaled anything out of the ordinary, and certainly nothing suggested that in just minutes, everything I understood about my family would be shattered. Upon reaching the check-in counter, I presented my ID and confirmation number, already anticipating the relief of shutting off my phone once I settled on the plane. The employee scanned my ticket, paused, and scanned it a second time. Her eyebrows furrowed in a way I immediately recognized as discomfort, not mere confusion. "I just need to look into something," she mumbled, tapping rapidly on the keyboard. A tight knot formed beneath my ribs. "Is there an issue?" I asked. She carefully tilted the display toward me. "Your ticket is showing as canceled. The reimbursement was processed an hour ago." The word canceled struck me like a heavy bag dropped suddenly. "No, that's impossible. I never canceled anything. The refund was issued to a card ending in." She hesitated before completing the sequence. 4401. My stomach plummeted straight through the terminal floor because I instantly knew whose payment information that was. My mother. I managed to thank the agent and moved away, the terminal suddenly seeming louder, brighter, and much harsher. The instant I retrieved my phone, it vibrated. A text preview popped up on the screen from Mom. "Have fun walking home. Loser." Loser? She hadn't bothered to soften it with a joke or even a weak emoji. Just that single word, sharp like broken glass. Another buzz arrived immediately from my father. "Thought you lived poor. Take a bus like you should." I stared until the text blurred together. People flowed around me like a swift current, and for a moment I couldn't tell if I was standing still or completely submerged. It wasn't about the canceled trip. It wasn't even the insults themselves. It was the stark clarity they provided. The painful realization that my parents didn't just view me as an inconvenience, they actively delighted in it. They preferred me diminished. They required me to remain insignificant. I exited the terminal into the chill air, unsure where I was headed, only certain I couldn't stay there another second. My hands trembled as I opened a rideshare application, but before I could finish entering my destination, a small white sedan pulled up beside me. The driver leaned across the passenger seat. "Are you all right?" he asked. "You seem like you just had a piano dropped on your whole day." I let out a sound that was almost a laugh. "Close enough. A text message." He gave a nod, the kind that signaled he'd observed enough in life to read between the lines. "Get in. I'm technically finished with my shift, but you look like you urgently need to be anywhere else." I slid into the passenger seat without more than a moment's hesitation. The car had a faint, comforting scent of pine and aged leather. He introduced himself as Leonard, a part-time driver who was a lifelong resident of Boise, and then he simply listened. No judgment, no interruptions. I found myself recounting the canceled ticket, the messages, and the years I spent silently enduring comments. I should have screamed back at them. When he finally parked close to a quiet municipal park, he settled his hands on the steering wheel. "You know," Leonard said softly, "people often disguise cruelty as affection. It never makes it true." I gazed out the windshield, watching the winter daylight shimmer through the bare tree branches. I took out my phone again, but this time not to reread their communication. I accessed a file I had kept hidden for years, named Options, Investments, Payments, Trust Deed. It contained documentation of every month they were late on the rental payments for the very house they didn't even realize I owned. For the very first time, I whispered to myself, "The anger isn't destroying me. It is refining me." By the time Leonard dropped me off near my building, the morning cold had turned even sharper, the kind of chill that brings total clarity. I thanked him, assured him I would be fine, and walked toward the entrance with the strange composure of someone whose mind has finally achieved stillness. My apartment building lobby was quiet and warm, faintly humming with the sound of the heater. Entering felt like stepping into a parallel dimension, one where I didn't need to reduce myself to accommodate someone else's comfort. I removed my coat, sat down at the kitchen island, and started my laptop. The file named Options was right where I had left it, a silent repository of the achievements my relatives had never cared to inquire about. I double-clicked the file, and the display instantly filled with years' worth of papers. Investment summaries, property payment records, and the official trust deed that listed me as the legal owner of the residence my parents had occupied for almost 2 years. I scrolled slowly, taking in the reality I had quietly built while they were busy dismissing my existence. Every displayed page served as a clear confirmation that I had achieved something remarkable without needing their consent or blessing. They assumed I lived frugally because I drove an older car and dressed simply. They never imagined I kept my life private specifically to shield it from them. However, the airport texts made one essential truth brutally evident. Protecting myself was no longer sufficient. I needed to focus on protecting my son, Miles. I had to stop pretending that their ingrained cruelty was something I could simply outgrow. Unwanted memories surfaced, sharp and clear. I recalled my sister, Sloane, pushing me out the front door on a cold night because her current boyfriend preferred fewer people around. I remembered my mother telling me to stop being so theatrical, while I stood outside with my backpack in the freezing weather. I saw my father handing Sloane cash on her college move-in day, then turning to me with a long lecture about the necessity of earning things the hard way. All these incidents merged into a calm, steady truth. I couldn't keep allowing them to systematically take pieces of me and still refer to it as family. I opened a different folder, a series of audio clips I had incidentally recorded the last time I went to their house to drop off a utility bill receipt. I hadn't intended to record anything. I had simply put a small baby monitor into my purse because I didn't trust leaving my belongings unguarded there. But when I played the first clip, their voices instantly filled my kitchen. "She thinks she's better than us," my mother commented. "Just cancel the flight. That'll teach her a lesson." "She can ride the bus," my father added. "She always pretends she's struggling. Maybe she should actually struggle for once." Their subsequent laughter was casual and light, the way people discuss inconveniencing a stranger, certainly not their own daughter. I leaned back in my chair, allowing the anger to settle. It wasn't the hot, uncontrolled rage I felt before, but something cold and perfectly focused. I wasn't going to fight them with comparable insults. I wasn't going to sink to their level of malice. Instead, I was going to leverage the very thing they had always most underestimated about me: thorough preparation. By mid-afternoon, I had prepared 3 separate eviction notices, one for each adult residing in the property. I carefully reviewed the lease agreements, the detailed payment records, and the violation documentation, every signature they had ever affixed without bothering to read the contents. The documents were completely unassailable. As the sun descended behind the lake outside my window, painting the sky with gentle rose and gold hues, I slipped the notices into a simple envelope. This time, my hands were perfectly steady. For years, they had characterized me as too pliable, too reserved, too willing to overlook things. Perhaps they were correct, but softness doesn't equate to weakness, especially when it finally turns inward and defends itself. I placed the envelope on the counter, took a deep, steady breath, and stated quietly to the empty room, "I am not returning as their daughter. I am returning as their landlord." 3 days after the airport incident, I approached my parents' walkway. I looked at the house I used to tiptoe through. The lawn was unmowed. The porch light flickered. Sloane's SUV sat crookedly in the driveway, typical of someone who expected others to fix things. I tightened my coat. I didn't knock. I just turned the handle. The familiar smells of lemon cleaner and stale coffee hit me. My mother was on the couch using her phone. My father was making a sandwich in the kitchen. Sloane was at the island, filing her nails, looking bored and comfortable. My mother looked up first. "Why are you here?" she demanded. No greeting, just irritation. My father ignored me. "Shouldn't you be sulking? Heard your little trip failed." Sloane smirked. "Yeah, figured you'd still be crying at the terminal. Guess the charity plane waited." Their light, careless laughter echoed. If they had looked closely, they would have seen my posture was different. My shoulders weren't curled inward. My voice was steady. I wasn't a guest anymore. I put my bag down. I pulled out the plain envelope and placed it in front of Sloane. "What is it?" she asked. "Your notice," I said simply. "All of yours." My mother snorted. "Notice for what? Eviction?" Silence fell. I set 3 papers down. My father stepped forward, ripping the one off the refrigerator. "You don't own this house." "Oh, I do." I pulled out the trust deed. "You signed a lease 2 years ago with Willow Creek Trust." My mother folded her arms. "We thought that was just a management company." "It is," I confirmed. "Mine." My father's face darkened. "This is absurd. You can't evict your own family." I tilted my head. You already did, twice before I turned 20. Sloane rolled her eyes. You're being dramatic. You don't have money to own a house. Interesting theory, I said. The payments, bills, and your signed lease say otherwise. My mother moved closer, voice rising. This is a joke. We raised you. No, I said calmly. You controlled me, you drained me, you punished me for having a life you didn't approve of. My father threw the notice down. You don't have grounds. I pressed play on my phone. The recording filled the kitchen. Mom's voice, cancel it, teach her a lesson. Dad's voice, she can take the bus. She's always dramatic. Then their laughter. Sloane stiffened. You recorded us. Yes, I said. I recorded tenants who violated their lease and used emotional abuse. My mother's face paled. Turn that off. Sloane slammed the counter. You can't kick us out, we're family. Exactly, I said. A family you prioritized over Miles when you made him sit on the floor last Christmas. Sloane started to speak, but my phone buzzed. Payment received from Sloane Baxter. Sloane jumped forward. You said the rent was late. It was, unless you apologized for laughing when I fell down the stairs carrying gifts for your children. Her jaw tightened. You're unbelievable. No, I said softly. I am consistent. My father tried again. Where do you expect us to go? I gave you 60 days notice on paper, I said. You ignored it. You're 3 months behind and you sent those texts. I met his eyes. You're punishing us for one joke. Sloane snapped. That wasn't a joke, I said. It was a confession. My mother grabbed the counter, panic replacing regret. Mia, be reasonable. Reasonable? You canceled my ticket, called me a loser, told me to walk home and enjoyed it. My father's voice cracked. You're really doing this. I opened the envelope one last time and placed the final sheet in the center. Their faces went white. It was the formal notice of enforcement, the document that allowed the sheriff to act. This is already filed. You have 3 days. My mother shook her head, whispering, We didn't mean to hurt you. Yes, I said quietly. You did. You just never expected consequences. Sloane looked around, suddenly small. What are you trying to prove? That I matter, I said, and that Miles deserves better than watching his mother get treated like an unpaid servant. My father threw his hands up. Unbelievable. I picked up my bag. 3 days, the sheriff handles the rest. As I stepped onto the porch, I heard my mother whisper, What happened to you? I paused. I stopped begging for a seat at a table I paid for. I walked away, leaving them frozen in the doorway. 3 days passed quickly. Thursday morning, a sheriff's car arrived. My parents stood on the porch with half-packed boxes, faces tight with disbelief. Sloane was gone. She'd left the night before, arguing with her husband about money. The sheriff calmly walked them through the process. No yelling, just the slow unraveling. My mother tried one last time, reaching for my arm. Mia, she whispered, we're still your parents. I stepped back. And I'm still the daughter you never protected. She looked at the house she thought she'd keep forever. When everything was cleared, I left the sheriff a sealed envelope. Inside, a photo of Miles and me smiling. On the back, This is the family I choose. When I drove back that evening, the lake outside my window was still and bright, reflecting years of peace. My phone buzzed once from Sloane, but I didn't open it. The airport, the insults, it all led me here to the moment I stopped letting their family define my worth. Miles ran to the door, arms wide, certain of me in a way my parents never were. That was enough. If you've had to reclaim your peace from those who should have protected it, tell me in the comments and hit subscribe.